Good morning. Today is July 6th and I'm still in Banff, Canada. I have 2 more days to go here teaching the Seduction of Spirit course, and then I go to New York. So first of all, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. The conversation is basically a result of my friends and all of you reading the book behind me, You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self, and Why It Matters. Thank you for the support of the book, and thank you for participating in this conversation. And I feel Hi Rishikesh Dikshit. Cheers. Thank you for your support, and thank you for basically engaging with me, because you bring out a lot of insight by your questions and by your discussions. Gabriella Pick, I went to your conference in Paris. Hi Deepak. Hi Gabby. Good to see you here. Erica R. Britt has noticed my t-shirt. Camp Qualia today. Awesome. Thanks Deepak. Thank you Erica. Okay, I need to, Christy Richardson says, I'm loving your book, Reinventing the Body, Resurrecting the Soul. Thank you Erica. Okay, let me continue, otherwise we'll never get through. Today's question from Aidan Cahill. It's a very profound question actually. Aidan asks, what does the body and brain of Homo sapiens play in all of this? How does this little organism become a subject of consciousness? First of all, Aidan, little correction. This organism is not a subject of consciousness. It's an object of consciousness, experienced in the subject that we call consciousness. Did the body and brain evolve in this universe before it was experienced by consciousness? Question mark. If so, without consciousness to provide form to energy, how could anything exist to be able to become a subject of consciousness? Does duality need a functioning organism, or is that part of the illusion? Okay, so I'll answer the question just in one sentence. Duality is the illusion. Okay, duality is the illusion. Israr Roy, love from Pakistan. Lots of love to you, Israr, and to all my Pakistani friends. Okay, so the question has been asked. The question has been posed, and that is very simple. Did the body and brain evolve before the body and brain were experienced by consciousness? Okay, I'll answer this question in a very detailed manner and very slowly, okay? So if we define consciousness, as my friend Rupert Spira, whose book, by the way, I have at my bedside, The Nature of Consciousness, Essays on the Unity of Mind and Matter, and I read it every day. But if by consciousness we go to Rupert's definition, consciousness is that in which all experience occurs, all experience is known, and out of which all experience is made. That consciousness is the knowing element in every experience. Then we can start from there. Okay? And let's just talk about the brain at the moment. Let's talk about the brain for the moment, because the same principles that I apply to the understanding of that which we call the brain, the same principles apply to that which we call the body and that which we call the universe. Okay? Same principles. Okay. Let's start with very raw experience. How do you, and by you I mean the awareness, how do you as awareness know that there is something called a brain? How do you know that? Well, because the brain is a name that humans have given to a particular experience. The experience is a visual experience of something that looks like this from the profile. Okay, it's a shape, it's a form, it's a color, it's a, if you want, a taste and smell. Some people do eat brains, and it's a color, it's a smell, it's a shape, it's a form, it's a texture, and it looks like this. You know, this would be a frontal cortex, so that which we call the frontal cortex. Here would be the limbic brain, this would be the reptilian or midbrain, and this would be the spinal cord. Okay, so how do you know there is something called a brain? Well, it's a name that humans have given to a shape and a form and an experience and a knowing. Who or what is it that knows that there is something called the brain? Well, it's consciousness, okay? It's consciousness that calls this experience, I'm just making a model of the experience, and this experience that one sees on a dissection table in a cadaver or on a CAT scan, this experience, human beings have agreed to call the brain. So the brain is how awareness knows itself as this experience, and then awareness, human awareness, defines this experience as an object called the brain, in this case the human brain. Okay? So what is the brain? The brain is a mode of knowing and a mode of experience, labeled, defined, described as an object. I think that should be clear. I hope it's clear for everyone. If not, I hope you can come back and listen to this or watch this again. P.T. Diana Beatrice says nomenclature assigned. Good. Okay, so break that experience, the brain, without that label, directly into what Rupert Spira and other teachers would call direct experience. The experience is just a sound, a taste, a smell, a color, a shape, a texture, and then putting all that together as qualia cam, putting all those qualities of experience together, a concept arises that this is the brain. Okay, so the consciousness and mind being the activity of consciousness, including thought, and thought being the interpretation of experience, come up with this concept brain. In the same way, they come up with the concept body and universe. So did this shape, did this form, did this brain evolve as a result of consciousness evolving? Solongo Clovitter says, I love my Chayo water bottle. It is made with love. Thank you, Solongo. You are always around. Wherever I look, there is Solongo. Okay, I come back to this. The human body, or that which we call the human body, and the human brain, I think can be best understood as the evolution of consciousness as an experience. So consciousness knows itself as this experience. and then this experience goes with all this experience, this room, the mountains behind me, and all of that. So consciousness evolves as this experience, and that which we call the body and the brain are part of the evolution of consciousness as experience. Consciousness by itself is all experiences, infinite possibilities of experience. So consciousness evolves as the experience that we call Homo sapiens, and the universe that goes along with that experience called Homo sapiens. Again, Homo sapiens is a name, a construct that humans came up with, human consciousness came up with. Okay, so the answer to your simple question is body and brain are the evolutionary expression of consciousness and an experience in human consciousness. And body, brain, and universe go together, the human universe, not the mosquito universe, not the dolphin universe, etc. Okay, so in reality, therefore, consciousness alone is, and consciousness is continuously expressing itself as all species. And at this point, what I'd like to do, because I sometimes get kind of exhausted trying to say the same thing in different words, so that sometimes you describe the same thing or you see the same thing from different perspectives, and then one gets it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little bit from The Nature of Consciousness, Essays on the Unity of Mind and Matter by Rupert Spira. But this time I'm not going to read Rupert Spira, I'm going to read from the Afterword, which was written by another brilliant philosopher, friend of mine, called Bernardo Kastrup. And by the way, I wrote the foreword to this book, which is a gem. And Bernardo Kastrup wrote the Afterword. And I'm going to read a little bit from the Afterword from Bernardo Kastrup, which will shed more light on what we are discussing. This is from page 157 of the book by Rupert Spira, the Afterword by Bernardo Kastrup. We normally believe and feel that we pass through three states of waking, dreaming, and sleeping, each period of 24 hours. The only reason we believe and feel that we pass through these states is that we have forgotten, overlooked, or ignored our essential nature of eternal, infinite awareness. Eternal, infinite awareness never passes through any state. All states pass through it. In fact, we have not forgotten, overlooked, or ignored our essential nature of eternal, infinite awareness, for we are not something other than awareness that can know or forget awareness. We are awareness itself. It is awareness itself that seems to have veiled itself by assuming the form of mind, thereby coloring itself with its own activity and appearing to itself as objective experience. In fact, it is not quite right to say that all states pass through awareness, although to do so is a legitimate concession in the early stages of this exploration to the mind that believes in the independent existence of objects and states. To say that all states pass through awareness suggests that a state comes from somewhere outside awareness, passes through awareness, and then leaves, like a train passing through a station. There is nowhere outside of awareness from which an experience or state could come, nor anywhere outside awareness into which it could pass. A movie doesn't pass through the screen, it is the screen. All there is, this is a favorite metaphor of Rupert Spira. A movie doesn't pass through the screen, it is the screen. All there is to a movie is the screen. The movie is a self-modulation of the screen. The three states of knowing, dreaming, and sleeping don't pass through eternal, infinite awareness. They are self-colorings of eternal, infinite awareness. In fact, only the waking and dreaming states are colorings of awareness. It is only from the perspective of the waking and dreaming states that deep sleep is considered to be a third state that exists in the time and space that are, from the perspective of these two states, considered real in their own right. Imagine two teenage boys sitting on the sofa watching television. Their mother comes in and asks the first son, "What are you watching?" He says, "Breaking Bad program." An hour later she comes in and asks the first son, "What are you watching?" This time he says, "The Simpsons." An hour later she comes in, the show is over and TV is turned off, and the mother asks the first son, "What are you watching?" He says, "Nothing." The mother also asks the second son the same series of questions. She comes in during Breaking Bad and says, "What are you watching?" He says, "I see the screen." An hour later she comes in again, "What are you watching?" "I see the screen." She comes in an hour later and the TV has been turned off. "What are you watching?" "I see the screen." The first boy thinks that he's seeing a multiplicity and diversity of objects during Breaking Bad and The Simpsons, and therefore when the program ends he thinks he's seeing a third state of the screen, nothing. The nothing that he thinks he sees at the end of the two programs is only in relation to the apparent multiplicity and diversity of things that he thought he was seeing during them. The second son doesn't superimpose something onto the screen during the two programs and therefore doesn't feel that he's seeing nothing when the TV is turned off. He sees the same screen throughout. If we think that the waking and dreaming states comprise a multiplicity and diversity of separate objects and selves, we will consider deep sleep a blank, empty nothing. Actually, this part that I'm reading, I suddenly realize, is written by Rupert Spira, because that's his favorite metaphor. But you got it, right? I think you understood what he's saying, that the infinite diversity of experience is literally the modulations of the screen. But now let me go to what I also really intended to read to you, and that is the little bit that I really was struck by from Bernardo Kastrup. So sorry for initially saying that what I was reading was Bernardo Kastrup, that was Rupert Spira. As I read it, I realized that was his metaphor, the screen. Okay, so here's Bernardo Kastrup. You see, we can acquire knowledge through three distinct avenues: empirical observation, rational thought, and introspection. Empirical observation consists in the subset of our experiences associated with the five senses. As such, if we define the world as encompassing everything we can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, then empirical observation consists in knowing the world directly. Notice that, defined in this way, the world is simply a set of experiences qualitatively equivalent to, for instance, personal imagination. Yet it differs from personal imagination in that it is collective rather than idiosyncratic. After all, we all seem to share the same world. Empirical observation of this collective world is thus an avenue of knowledge orthogonal to the imagination, as history painfully illustrates. Aristotle, for example, imagined that heavier objects fell to the ground faster than lighter objects, an idea that persisted for almost 2 millennia. Only when Galileo decided to empirically observe whether that were really the case, by famously dropping 2 cannonballs of different weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, did we realize that the world is in fact different from what Aristotle had imagined it to be. Thanks to empirical observations such as Galileo's, we now have been able to know the world well enough to put a man on the moon and robots on Mars, and even land a probe on a comet. By empirically observing the world, we can discern its patterns and regularities during observations. But to infer how the world behaved before observation and predict how it will behave in the future, we need to model those patterns and regularities in the form we have come to call the laws of nature. And here is where the second avenue of knowledge comes in. Rational thought enables us to deduce unobserved and even unobservable aspects of the world from observed ones. It allows us to connect the dots and extrapolate the boundaries of our knowledge beyond what can be directly apprehended through the five senses. It is rational thought that, for instance, enables engineers to know which building's design will stand firmly and which phone design will communicate reliably without having to try out every possible variation. It is also rational thought that enables us to infer explanations such as the Big Bang and hominid evolution, even though we cannot empirically observe either. Rational thought provides the template along which both explanatory and predictive models are woven. And now come to his punchline in this paragraph. The third and final avenue of knowledge is, of course, introspection, what I call self-inquiry. By introspecting, we turn our attention from the world to the knower of the world and the process of knowing. We ask, who or what is it that knows? How does it know what it knows? As Rupert says, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? What is the nature of the knowing with which all knowledge and experience are known? Knowledge only has meaning insofar as these questions are answered. After all, as a state of the knower and the outcome of the process of knowing, knowledge is secondary to both. Everything we believe we know through the other two avenues, empirical observation and rational thought, is thus ultimately conditioned by introspection. Whatever information we derive from observation and thought only has meaning insofar as we understand the nature of the knower and how it knows. Without such understanding, the natural patterns discernible through observation and thought are akin to ripples without water, choreographies without dancers, spin without tops. They delineate an empty mold whose actual substance can only be filled through introspection. And here is where the problem lies. Introspection requires an intimate engagement with the subject of experience as opposed to the objects. Remember, the objects are merely the awareness knowing itself as the object. But science, whose values and methods have informed our mainstream cultural narrative for the past 2 centuries or so, must stand clear of subjectivity. As Rupert explains, in its search for the absolute truth, science rejects subjective experience on the grounds that it is personal and therefore cannot be validated by anyone other than the person having the experience. This is entirely appropriate insofar as one chooses, as science does, empirical observation and rational thought as one's sole avenue of knowledge. After all, as discussed above, the world as defined as the shared subset of our experiences as opposed to the figments of one's personal imagination. So to properly assess the world, science must indeed set aside idiosyncratic reports and focus on experiences consistently shared by multiple individuals. But whilst internally consistent, the scientific method is incomplete in that it disregards true introspection. As such, it is ill-equipped to answer any of the fundamental questions about the nature of the knower and the process of knowing. Correctly understood, science merely models the patterns and regularities of the world without providing any insight into its underlying nature. It doesn't tell us what the world is, only how it behaves. Very important. Science does not tell us what the world is, only how it behaves. It characterizes the choreography without saying anything about the dancer. It predicts the ripples without saying anything about the water. It describes the spin without saying anything about the top. In Rupert's words, quote unquote, most people believe that science is gradually inching its way towards an understanding of the fundamental reality of the universe. However, until consciousness itself becomes the focus of scientific interest, researchers will still be seeking the fundamental reality of the universe in 1,000 years from now. Be that as it may, it seems difficult for most scientists to acknowledge the inherent limitations of their method. As a former professional scientist myself, this is Bernardo Kastrup, I base this assertion on my own personal experience. Scientists have a natural tendency to believe that they are unveiling what the world is, not just how it behaves. Believing otherwise would detract from much of the romantic allure that brought scientists to their profession in the first place. Moreover, it is admittedly difficult at a psychological level to do science without at least a working hypothesis for interpreting the patterns and regularities discerned through experiments. Stanford physicist Andre Linde, renowned for his theories of cosmological inflation. By the way, Andre Linde is credited with eternal inflation, the latest interpretation in cosmology of the behavior of the universe and the origins of the universe. So now, quote unquote, Andre Linde, let us remember that our knowledge of the world begins not with matter but with perceptions. Later, we find out that our perceptions obey some laws, which can be most conveniently formulated if we assume that there is some underlying reality beyond our perceptions. This model of a material world obeying laws of physics is so successful that soon we forget about our starting point and say that matter is the only reality, and perceptions are only helpful for its description. This assumption is almost as natural and maybe as false as our previous assumption that space is only a mathematical tool for the description of matter. So, do you get it, my friends? I'll just read a few more lines from Bernardo Kastrup. So, what was originally a mere working model to facilitate the interpretation of scientific observations has now hardened into the dogma of a material world outside mind. This hasty jump was driven by the psychological need to fill a vacuum. Scientists couldn't operate without a way to think about the world in terms of its underlying reality. While constructing abstract characterizations of the choreography, they needed a way to visualize the dancer. And then, because proper introspection had never been part of their professional skill set, this is something, I think that my friend Michael Shermer, Sam Harris, what's his name, Richard Dawkins, Brian Cox, Lawrence Krauss, they all need to learn a little bit of self-reflection and self-awareness. I'm saying this with compassion and not with condescension. I'm saying this because I'd like to get along with these guys. They're so smart and they describe the best models of the universe, and then frequently forget that they have replaced the territory with a map, and the map is not the territory. Actually, I'm getting to know on Twitter Brian Cox a little bit, and I think he's one of the few people who's willing to look at this way of understanding the world. So anyway, that was digression, but here what I'm saying is scientists need proper introspection, meditation, self-inquiry, transcendence, but scientists, I'm going to quote Rupert again, and then because proper introspection had never been part of their professional skill set, the professional skill set of scientists, they simply took the world at face value. To this day, we pay the price for such a lazy blunder. And this is what I have to say to you, my friend Michael Shermer, because I'm going to send this video to you as well. You took the world at face value, and to this day we pay the price for such a lazy blunder. Indeed, if scientists knew what you may know, you, my friends, may know, those who read this book or Bernardo's book or my book or many other books by philosophers and those who are engaged in self-reflection, if scientists only knew what a lot of other people know, they would surely have thought things through a little more carefully. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of this afterword, but I do recommend, first of all, The Nature of Consciousness, Essays on the Unity of Mind and Matter. I recommend that you go on Rupert Spira's website, and also Bernardo Spira's website. I recommend that you continue to engage with me here, and then we will be able to expand our understanding of the universe. And so become a member of Qualia Camp. Qualia Camp is discovering a cosmic self.com, where we engage every day. Okay, so did I answer the question? I think I did. Brain, body, and universe are mental constructs, ideas, concepts for experience, and experience furthermore in the species of consciousness that we call Homo sapiens. Another construct. Okay, another construct. I think this is all important. I think this is all important because the purely materialistic worldview, matter is the only reality, has made us consumers, has made us greedy, has made us egocentric, has made us go to war, has helped us facilitate the destruction of the planet, the ecosystem, climate change, all of those things. We need to return to our source in one being and realize that the ultimate truth is being, is awareness, is consciousness, is existence. The only thing we can certainly say is there is existence. And then certainly say also there is awareness of existence. And when we realize that awareness of existence and existence are the same thing, then we are ready to heal ourselves. The word healing, the word holy, the word wholeness all come from the same root. Healing is the return of the memory of wholeness. And let's make sure that at least some of us can get together to reach that critical mass for healing.